Before we take a look at the command line, let's take a moment to establish some context about what it is and why we're using it. Simply put, the command line takes instructions from you, the user, and makes them happen on your computer. But if you're watching this video, you've actually done that before. You had to click to open your browser, maybe you right-clicked to put in your credentials, maybe you dragged the size of your browser to make it smaller so you could see it easier. All of these methods of interacting with your computer are you giving your computer instructions and it running them and making them happen. The difference between this and the command line is twofold. First of all, the command line can only understand written instructions. This makes it tricky because you have to then know what those instructions are, but it ends up giving you immensely more power over what your computer can do. And we'll take a look at what this means in a moment. But it can also do things that you are used to doing in other ways on your computer. So we're going to start actually somewhere else. And here's the instructions for this video. What I would like you to do is open up your File Explorer. On a Mac, this is called a Finder. It might be called a Windows Explorer or a File Explorer on your computer. Whatever it is, I'd like you to go ahead and open up that application. Navigate to your folder in there that's called Documents or My Documents. It's auto-created on every computer. And inside of that Documents folder, create a new folder called Test Folder. And do that through your Finder. So if you already know how to do this and have done this as I'm talking, great. Or if you've never done this before, then you can go ahead and use all of the methods you already know of how to interact with your computer to try and figure it out. So I'm gonna open my Finder, here it is. And there's all of these buttons, right? There's a menu up here, there's a menu up over here. You can right click, you can drag, all of the things that you already know how to do. You can try them out and see how they interact and see if you can use them to create a new folder in your Documents folder. Or you can go ahead and Google it. Either way, if you have not done so yet, you can go ahead and pause this video, figure out how to make a new folder, and come back when you have made it. At this point, I imagine everyone has a folder in their Documents folder called Test Folder, so let's go ahead and see what that looks like. I see that my Documents folder is here. There's this button where you can make a new folder, or you can right-click and create a new folder. There's a few different ways to do it. I'm going to click here, and it creates a new folder that's untitled and prompts us to name it. So I'm going to name it Test Folder and hit Enter, and there we go. We have our test folder in our Finder. Now, there's a couple of things that there's a couple of things in that process that we can take for granted because we are using a graphical user interface. What I mean by that is visually, this Finder told us a lot about what we were doing. And what I mean by that, I'm going to exit out and reopen it. I would actually argue that even though I said there were 3 steps here, we actually did 5. So we opened our Finder, or whichever application we used, and then we had to orient ourselves. Where are we right now in our folder structure? And because it's visual, it actually told us, it highlighted this Lily Schachter folder, right? So that told us where we are. But we're not going to have a visual aspect when we're using our command line, so we won't be able to take that for granted. So I'm gonna add as a step, figure out where you are in your folder structure. Once we did that, we couldn't just navigate to our Documents folder if we don't know where our Documents folder is. Visually, I can see it's not in here, it's not over here, oh, here is my Documents folder, and then I can navigate to it by just clicking it. But if we can't see it visually, we're going to have to figure out where our Documents folder is. So there's another step here. We figured out where we are, and then we need to figure out where the Documents folder is. Then we can navigate to it, and then we can create the new folder. I'm actually going to go back to my Documents folder here and delete Test Folder, because we're going to be creating a new one through the command line. We're going to do that right now. I'm actually going to leave my Finder open here because it's helpful to be able to compare them. And I'm going to be using the command line application that comes with a Mac. But your computer might have a different kind. So I'm going to open Mac's command line. It's called the terminal. You can see that I have it here in my dock, but you probably won't. So if you are unfamiliar with how to open the terminal, you can use this little magnifying glass up here called the spotlight search, and you can type in terminal. But that is, again, if you are on a Mac. If you are not on a Mac, then your command line application might be called PowerShell or command prompt. Any of these will work, but it's important to note all of these command line applications, terminal, PowerShell, command prompt, all of them are pieces of software that software engineers wrote, and they wrote them to be able to understand certain commands. But they wrote them separately. So the commands that I put in for the terminal may not work on your computer's command line. This is totally fine for two reasons. One, there is a website linked with this video that has a table of all of the commands for terminal and for Windows. And you can pause the video and take a look in this table, find the command that I use, see what the Windows version is, and use that instead. I recommend this method because it's really important to know that your command line exists on your computer and you can use it on your computer whether you're coding or not. This is just a way to have more power over what your computer can do. You don't need to be coding to make this work. However, if you would rather be able to follow along directly as I do it, you can also download the text editor VS Code, Virtual Studio Code, and it has it's called a Linux terminal built in that you can use exactly as I am using it. So feel free to do whichever you would like. Pause this video, download VS Code, or pause this video, open up that table and take a look, whichever you prefer. Let's get started. So I'm going to open up the terminal. Yours will probably look different. I have mine set to open blue, but it might open black with white writing. And this gives us a little bit of information that we can take a look through. So this tells me, hey, you are the user Lily Schachter, just like I am here, and you are on your MacBook Pro, just like my MacBook Pro is here. It's the same thing. This tilde tells us something, but it gets confusing until we have a little bit more information. So here we are. Now, we have opened our application that we are going to be doing this in. It's no longer our Finder or Windows, but we opened our application. So I'm going to put an X here because we did it. Now we need to figure out where we are in our folder structure, right? There's nothing highlighting which folder we have open right now. It's unclear. We need to figure out where we are in our folder structure. And we are going to do that using a command called pwd. Why is it called pwd? Because that is what an engineer chose when they wrote this program. But pwd stands for print working directory. Directory is a word you're going to hear a lot. It is simply another word for folder. For our purposes, they are one and the same, exactly usable, interchangeable, exactly the same. We want to print the name of our working directory. Printing it does the same thing as printing it as we've seen in other code. We want to print out the information into our terminal here. And we want to print the working directory because the working directory is the one we are currently in. That's the one we're working in. So I typed in pwd, I'm going to hit enter, and it tells me. This tells me something called the path of the folder we're in. What that means is my computer needs to know not just that we're in a folder called Lily Schachter, but where on my computer that folder exists. It needs to start from the root, the biggest folder that has everything else on my computer in it. And it says, okay, in that, there's a folder called users. Let's open that one up. I'm the only user on my computer, but if you share your computer or if you use a computer at a library or at a school, you might remember having to log in as a specific user. Each user has their own folder. Mine is called Lily Schachter. We opened that folder, and we can actually now see that the terminal opened in exactly the same folder that the Finder did. So if I exit out of the Finder again and I reopen it from scratch, it has put me in my Lily Schachter folder, which is exactly where the terminal put me as well. So now we have figured out where we are in our folder structure, and we did that with pwd. That was the command that we used. So we did this. I'm going to actually just pwd. And now, again, we are in a situation where what was very clear visually we don't know how to find anymore. We need to figure out where the documents folder is. And we are going to do that by listing out all of the folders that exist in our Lily Schachter folder. All of the folders that we have access to from the folder we're currently in are the ones that we have access to here. So I'm going to type ls, that stands for list. We are listing the directories inside the one we're currently in. And we can see that the folders we see in our terminal are actually exactly the same folders that we see in our Finder. There's a couple of differences, but we can see what's the same. Applications is the same. We've got music and music, movies and movies, public, pictures, pictures, and we actually have a few more that we can see through our terminal. This is one of the ways in which the terminal is more powerful than the Finder. But we can actually see that even though on my setup, we can see the documents as part of iCloud, I can actually access it in my terminal through my main folder. So we have found our documents folder. We figured out where it is, and we did that with the command ls. Now that we see where our documents folder is, we need to go there. We want to change the directory that we're working in from the one that we're currently in to the one called documents. Change directory, the command for changing directory is cd. However, this is a little bit different. We can't just change directory, hit enter. What directory did we mean to go to? cd is a command that actually requires us to give it another piece of information. We want to change directory into which other folder. So I'm going to give it the name of the folder I want to change into. I'm going to do that in a specific way. So capital D, DOC for doc, and I'm going to hit tab. Tab is just a shortcut, but it's a really great one to learn. It will look through all of the folders available to it, and it will say, okay, is there one that starts with DOC? Because if there is, hit tab, which I just did, and it will autofill it for you. This saves a lot of time as you start using your terminal more and more. But note, if I just do DO and hit tab, it runs into an issue. It says, hey, there's 2 folders that start with DO. Which one were you talking about? So I have to give it more information of the C, and I can hit tab, and I hit enter, and what has changed? We can see that the tilde became documents. Tilde is another shortcut. It just means home, just take me home. But we're not home anymore. We're not in our home folder. We have now moved to our documents folder. And so I can mirror that here. And we've moved into our documents folder by typing cd documents. That's what we did. And we can use what we already have learned to double check if this worked correctly. So I can print my working directory again, and it tells us, yes, we are no longer in the Lily Schachter folder. We went inside the Lily Schachter folder, found a folder in there called documents, and opened that up. And that's the path to where we are now. We can also list out what's in our documents folder and compare to see if it's the same. So I typed ls to compare, and we can see, yes, bscraper, that's a folder that I have in here, contract work, JTC, all of these are the same because we are navigating the same folders in our terminal that we are in our Finder. So now we are here, we have made it, and we can create a new folder here called test folder. And again, this is just another command that we need to know in order to use it. To make a new directory, it's mkdir for make directory, and this one works like cd. We can't just say make an untitled directory, and in fact, if we try, the computer didn't break, nothing bad happened, but it just said that's not how you use mkdir. You need to give us something, you need to give us a little more information, try again. So mkdir, and I'm going to give it the name of the folder that I want to create, called test-folder, and I'm going to hit enter, but before I hit enter, as I do, take a look at the Finder window on the left. Boom, there it is. The test folder was created in both places, and if I type ls again, there's the test folder now. Because everything that you can do in your Finder, you can do through your terminal, but not the other way around. The terminal is vastly more powerful, and you can do many, many more things with it. If you are interested in learning more about what you can do with it, whether you are on a Mac or not, that table of the different commands is a great place to start because it has all of the commands for either computer that you can do in your terminal.